This is literally intro. Keithy and Nick and myself will run through a whole lot of stuff on Waracle, just compliance generally, and then just a little bit from sort of an HR point of view. And we are the team. We're here for you. If you've got any questions about compliance, please feel free to come and ask us. Can everybody see okay? Are these slides all right? Yeah? Okay, cool. The whole goal of this whole sort of exciting get-together roadshow is really just to make sure we're protecting you guys. Okay, we're protecting our team. We're also protecting the client and the company, but you guys are the most important part of that. Okay, especially for me. And I'm now going to hand over to Keith to the exciting stuff.
So I'm going to talk about data protection, but I'm going to be building on the message that Angela has hopefully just implanted in you. It is incredibly important. Compliance, modern compliance, is not a checklist like it used to be. You got to do this, you got to do that, health and safety, check. It's about protecting your assets, and that's you guys. I'll give you one little story as we go through about that, but essentially this is a two-way and it's a team thing. So we're not here just to give you loads of rules and regulations. That sort of compliance is dead, it's finished. This is about building a team and getting a continuous progress towards the goals and aims of what we need for compliance. Pretty much, unless you've been living in a padded cell for the last 6 months, you wouldn't have escaped the fact that data protection and other aspects of compliance have become absolutely huge and crucial to what we're doing, hence the expression, we're all in this. I spend a lot of time on the ICO website, the Information Commissioner's Office website, who control data protection compliance in the UK, and it's a really easy website to use and navigate, and it's full of interesting stuff, particularly if you go to the enforcement page. They list every single enforcement action they take on that website. It's updated 2 or 3 times a week. So anything that they do, whether you read it in the newspapers, is on their website with the actual facts behind what they've done. And I'm not going to turn this into a, this is all the bad stuff that's going on, and it's not going to be a data protection lesson. What I'm here is to tell you about the resources that we're putting in place for your protection. So size doesn't matter to the ICO. They are interested in data protection incidents, so it doesn't matter if it's Facebook or it's an individual, a nurse or a school teacher or a policeman. They're all there, and you can read this. So you'll be reading about Facebook and WhatsApp, and the next thing you're talking about a school teacher in Kent. So it doesn't matter, and the sector doesn't matter, whether it's business, whether it's a charity, whether it's a public sector. They're interested in data that's used in an environment where the data does not belong to the organisation that's using it. The offence doesn't matter, and offence really just means mistakes. And if you look at the mistakes that they're looking at, they're not new mistakes to the IT world. They're old mistakes that people have been using and making mistakes for a long, long time. These are just some random ones. This charity is actually a Bible charity. Got fined £100,000 because its network was completely insecure. There was no security on it at all. You didn't have to hack it. You could just go and look at it, and all the data of all their clients, thousands of all over the world, was there. This email, misdirected email, that's been going on since email was invented. That was a policeman, CID officer, who sent the details of all the victims of child abuse to the people that had carried out the child abuse. So that was kind of a bit of a mistake. And this is the one I thought I'd mention it to you. I was down at the ICO last week at a conference, and I sat down next to a guy called Simon Charlton, who was the DPO, the Data Protection Officer for Heathrow Airport. That was in the news recently, a lost USB stick with personal data on it. And I said to him that must have been stressful. And the first thing he said to me was, we felt we really let the client down, the employee down. He shouldn't have had that USB stick. We're not even supposed to use them. As a matter of interest, we don't use USB sticks in Waracle. It's in our policies not to use them. That's for your protection, okay? That's purely there so you don't end up in that sort of embarrassing scenario. There was no thought of the client, the guy who'd lost it, had done anything wrong. It was more the fact, as we're trying to do, that it's all about your protection.
Sorry, just to ask, so who is it that got those fines? Was it the businesses?
The businesses, yeah, it's the businesses.
Right.
You know, unless the individual has committed a criminal offence, it's the businesses that get clobbered. So fines matter, obviously, it's money, but for us, that's not the real issue. Now, you can all read that, so I'll let you read it. That's the UK Information Commissioner recently speaking. She's been on a world tour because we lead the field in this. GDPR is seen as a world leader, and the UK's part in GDPR is one of the original collaborators to draft it. So it's all about your reputation, okay? We are a supply chain provider to a lot of important clients, and our reputation in the compliance area is now absolutely essential. Lose that, it's kind of an existential threat to your business. So, just to recap the messages, focus on basic security procedures. For the people in this room, this is really, really low-level stuff that you're all, you know, you deal with every day. Learn from the mistakes of others. You can go to the ICO website, you can read them. Whenever an interesting one comes around, I stick it out on Slack. Follow it up, read it. It takes a minute or so, and think to yourself, blimey, that's embarrassing. I'll make sure we don't do that. And then think about our reputation and what it means to our business. We don't want to be a red top newspaper headline. I'm just going to run through this one because this is kind of sums up, it draws together and it passes on to the next stage as well. That Morrisons have currently a case that is going to the highest court in the United Kingdom. The story here is this guy was a senior analyst in Morrisons. Morrisons use G Suite, one of the largest G Suite users in the UK, which is something that we use, so that's why it caught my eye. And this guy was pissed off. Someone had upset him at work, so he thought, what a good idea, I'll hack into G Suite, which as he had senior access, it was very easy for him to do, upload all the client details and stick them up on the internet, which is what he did. It's not turned out too well for him. He's doing 8 years in prison because this started out as a criminal offence. So malicious use of IT for this purpose is a criminal offence. You go to prison for it. This guy's doing 8 years, and I doubt he's going to get a job in IT again when he gets out. Morrisons staff got the hump and got themselves a solicitor. They're now suing Morrisons for damage for the fact that their data was up there. Not one single one of them has lost a penny because of it, but it's ambulance chasing, isn't it? So that they lost in the High Court, they lost in the Appeal Court, and they're currently appealing it to the Supreme Court that they shouldn't have to pay their staff quite substantial damages for what this guy did. We haven't got a conclusion to that yet, but none of this is at the incentive of the ICO. This is all criminal and civilian case. It says to me that there's always been an issue in IT, and it goes back to, again, the invention of IT, that you can't lock down systems against people who work internally at system admin level. You never could. There's always someone somewhere who's going to access the data, and if that person turns rogue, it's out there. Why that's important is because that's what I call old school compliance, trying to lock stuff down. That's not the modern way, it's not what the ICO want us to do, it's not what we do at Waracle. What we say is, I've got a room full of system administrators here, all of you know far more about IT than I will ever know, and you're far more talented and capable people in IT than I am, certainly. So me trying to lock the system down to keep you out is just a joke, and everybody knows that. So you don't do it anymore. What we do now is we have a policy, and it's all embracing, and it's continuous development. So we implement the policy, which in our case we implemented a GDPR data protection policy in May. Then we gather information from multiple sources and we improve the policy, we rewrite it, and we just keep doing that. There's no end goal here. Compliance is a continuous program of development that involves everyone in the company feeding backwards and forwards. That's what we're aiming for. We gather information. The ICO are putting out more and more information. They're a really good organisation. They're what they call a humble regulator. They're there to assist rather than just to chase stuff down. As I've already said, most of what they're looking at is either incredibly stupid or incredibly criminal. They're very hard on criminals, which I happen to love. You know? The media, we can read stuff, it's in there every day. Other companies, all our clients have rewritten in all their compliance policies. These come to me, I look through them, there's a lot of synergy there. You know, how are they seeing compliance? We're working with them. We have legal advisors, Blackadder solicitors, there's a GDPR specialist there that I work with all the time. But the biggest single resource is in this room. It's each other, because you'll all have your ideas and knowledge about how this should work, and we need to hear them. You need to be feeding it back in. We are listening. I'm just going to run down our latest data protection policy, which is open to the whole. You can find it just by searching it. It's open to all data protection policy. You don't have to do that. If you want to, that's fine. I'll cover what you do need to do. So we formalised this business of continuous review. It's written in their plain language in the policy. We've clarified all our data protection roles and responsibilities. Ian's going to talk a little bit more about that. We've clarified the concepts of personal data, sensitive data, and increasingly people are talking about the associated risks. We've introduced Waracle data maps, and Nick is going to talk about that, and Ian. We've refined our electronic security policy. This is the kind of educational bit that the standards that we require everyone in the company to work for. All of that has been put completely intact into the staff handbook. So it's there for you. It is long, yeah, it's not a riveting read, it's going to put you to sleep quicker than I will, but it's all stuff you know anyway. There's nothing new in it, it's just years and years of common sense about using strong passwords, you know, not using USB sticks when you've got cloud-based tools to use, and just lots and lots of stuff like that in it. So although it is long, it's not going to tell you anything you don't already know, but it is there if you want to ask a question or answer a question. We've introduced for the first time a bring your own device policy. Now, ours can't be the same as other organisations because we want people to bring their own devices and use their own devices in the workplace. It assists us in what we're doing. So what we've done is we've written a very flexible policy that encourages you to use your own device in a compliant manner, and think about your data segregation as well. Think about, you know, when you should and should not be using your own data, your own use of your Apple ID and things like that. So it's all laid down in there. And most importantly, we've introduced a compliance feedback tool. So when you're doing all of this and you think we've done something wrong or you can improve it, then please say so. You know, it's completely open. There's no one's going to get in any way stressed out that you're saying, well, we don't agree with this. We welcome it. The wrong way. And this is it. It's new. It will have bugs and teething problems, but if you search compliance feedback tool, it's in there as a Word document, so you can link to it or you can go straight to the form. And we want people to use this, not least because it needs testing, it needs improving, it needs developing itself. So please, if you've got anything to say at the end of this or at any time with compliance, there's your tool. You don't have to do it this way. You can send me an email, you can send me a message on Slack, whatever. We're flexible. What's coming downstream? Data protection impact assessments. I'm not going to say much about because Nick's going to mention them later. But basically, these are a legal requirement of anybody that's doing any sort of processing that involves any sort of risk to personal data. Now, we haven't really done much of them already because basically we do them all the time. You do them, you know, whenever you're building and developing apps as good practice. We're just not using that DPIA terminology. DPIAs are a no-brainer for Waracle because they're going to help us with our brand image, they're going to help us with compliance, and we're already doing that work in the first place. We're just not referring it to that way. I'm going to leave it to Nick to talk a little bit more about them, but that's something you're going to see more and more of. Development, security standards, and security innovation. Again, these are technical measures, and I'll let the other guys talk about them. Greater contract oversight and due diligence, probably wrong word, greater. It should be more consistent. Every contract we're entering into now has to be aligned with data protection law, which has to stress who's got responsibility for processing, who's got responsibility for control. So that's now something that is de rigueur for every single contract. One thing about this that you'll see, the last 6 to 9 months, which I've been involved with, has been nearly all policy. It's been training, it's been writing things down. We're moving away from that now. That's kind of done. We're moving into the technical area of how we're building stuff and how we're going to develop what's called privacy by design. And now I'm going to hand over to Ian, who's going to talk to you on a more interesting technical level.
Hopefully. So, hi. As I said earlier, I'm Ian. I've been with the company for 7 years now. I remember when we only had 8 staff at Waracle, so seeing how big we've grown is amazing. So I'm going to talk really quickly through this. I don't want this to be a lesson, so I'm going to go through what the data maps are, why do we need to have a compliance data map, what do we need to map, and what things need to go in it, where are we going to map the data, when are we going to map the data, and who's going to maintain it. So why do we have to have a compliance data map? So this is now contractually required by all of our clients, so we'll be in breach of our contract if we don't have this data map. It's a data protection requirement to define the legal protection classification. So these are different classifications that all projects and work that we do have to be given so that we understand what our role in data protection is. So these are data controller, data processor, and managed teams. So I'll go through each one. So for data controllers, so the ICO's definition is a controller determines the purposes and means of processing personal data. So this is just where we are responsible for the storage of the data. So where we own the data, not necessarily own it because it's actually our employees that own the data, but we're responsible for the storage of it. So this is all things like CVs, HR docs, sales, and marketing. So anything that we own and that we control. This differs from data processor. So the ICO's definition again, a processor is responsible for processing personal data on behalf of the controller. So this is where we have access to the data, but we don't own the data. So this is all projects that we usually work with that we are hosting. So all of the smaller projects like the Ryder Cup, and we might have a hosting environment, that's where we are classified as the data processor, but we never actually own the data. So managed teams, we don't really have a remit here for data protection. So we aim to have neither data controller nor data processor. But it's not to say that we have to disregard everything, it just means that we're offloading that control onto the client, and they're the ones that stipulate everything that we do for data protection means. So like Clydesdale Bank, Scottish Power, Sainsbury's Bank, and Royal London. So most of you guys will apply this way, but it's good to be aware of the different classifications so that we can start asking questions. So what do we need to map, and what things need to go into the map? So everything we develop. So we need to give everything a legal classification, what client it is, what project it is, the type of engagement, whether it's a project or whether it's an on-site team, who the internal product owner is, where the project's run from, and whether we host anything and where that data is stored. That's probably the most important of all the things on this list, because contractually we need to, with all the European laws, we need to make sure that all the data is stored in Europe, or where there's a business case for it to not be stored in Europe, why is that? And all the tools that we have for AWS, Azure, Rackspace, they all give us geo tools to locate the data and choose where we store any of the data that we're working with. As well as anything we develop, we need to be tracking any service we use in the process of developing. This could be anything from Slack to Jira, Bitrise, Bitbucket, anything that we're using, it has to be mapped in our data map so that we can make sure that they're compliant as well. So this all passes through Keith and our team as well. So where are we going to map the data? Those of you that know me know that I'm a spreadsheet geek, so everything's in the spreadsheet. This is just a small snapshot of a spreadsheet. It's got many, many more columns and many, many more rows. So columns is everything I've discussed before, where it's stored, what the data classification is, who is responsible for it. And then every row is every single environment that we have for it. So we have staging environments, development environments, production environments. We need to be logging every single thing that we do. So when we're going to put this together, with a lot of help from a lot of people, we managed to pull together most of what we've got. So thank you to everyone that has helped me along the way. We've done a lot of work here, but the most important thing is that we need everyone's help to make sure this is continually up to date. Like Keith said, everything is that process of refinement. We need to be looking at what we're doing, making sure that we audit it, making sure that everything is in there and that nothing slips through the cracks. So Nick and myself will own this spreadsheet, but it's important that we keep it up to date, help each other. If something's missing, let's get it in there. So separate to the data maps, Keith briefly mentioned it, and Keith's put a lot of work into all these different policies for security. So I'll just quickly summarize this. You can find all these documents on the policies through Google Drive anyway. But by default, everything should be searchable unless it contains any sensitive data. And in that case, it should be made private, and then we have a spreadsheet for tracking all the documents that have sensitive data in them. It's just in case we receive a request that someone's personal data needs to be removed, that we know where to go to find it. So finally, understanding all this was a big sea change for me. It took Keith and I a while to finally understand the difference between data processor and data controller, but now it seems pretty simple. But we just want people to start asking questions. The more we talk about it in the Dundee office, the more we hear each other asking the right questions and talking about do we have a legitimate reason for accessing this data, and how or where are we storing this data. So if in doubt at all, contact the development compliance team. Nick, myself, reach out to Keith, Angela. We all will know who to point you in the direction of. So it's important that we just start asking questions about the data that we are collecting. I'll now hand over to Nick to talk technically.
Thanks, Ian. Yeah, so even though we're going to be dipping our toes in the technical side of it, this is not a deep dive. This is not me telling you how to develop to be compliant. Ideally, you'll have thought about this, spoke about this, chatted about this already. But if you haven't, hopefully you learn something. And for those who haven't, this will also give you a chance to show some of the things that we do at Waracle and some of the projects that I work in the projects team. These basically kind of boil down to the four things that we want to kind of get across the day. We're moving, and this is right across the company, we're aiming to get privacy by design into all the applications. And this means kind of starting from the kind of old Facebook model of hoover up every bit of data you can get your hands on, whether or not you might need it or think about needing it, or think you can sell it later on, to do we need it? And if we need it, we have to ask for it. And if we need to ask for it, make sure you ask for it first before you do anything with it. It's quite a big mind shift, especially if you're in Silicon Valley, but at Dundee and Glasgow and Edinburgh should be slightly easier. As Keith mentioned, Ian as well, the data protection impact assessments, we do them anyway. We're just not formalising them so far. We will be from now on. It's basically saying, what data are we going to need? How is this application going to impact or be impacted by GDPR and data protection issues? What types of data are we going to be collecting? What do we need? Why do we need it? And ensuring that any risks associated with storing or processing that data are taken care of, written down, and minimised against losing it, which brings me on to the minimising the breach severity. It is naive to believe that we can make infallible systems. So go on the basis that you assume that there will be a breach at some point, and the goal here is to minimise the severity or the impact of it. There is many things that we can do to do that. Some which ask me afterwards, or Slack, emails, or whatever. I'd imagine most of you are doing it anyway. One of the best tools is just ask each other, because we've all been around long enough to know of some of the stupid things that people do, that then data gets lost, or servers don't get patched, or this or that. So yeah, follow industry standards where you can, follow best practices. As Keith said, look to the media. Equifax is a great example of very sensitive data, being very silly with it. Not having the proper processes and standards in place to make sure that you don't lose it. And then, yeah, you go and lose 140 million records, some of which are exceptionally hard to replace, all because you didn't patch a web server somewhere. There is projects out there like OWASP. They list a top 10, update it pretty much every year with the same things to methodologies to kind of avoid or follow, which should help to reduce the impact of any breaches. Like I said, no system's infallible. If you can't make one, let me know. I'll take credit for it, and we'll all be very rich. this is a little bit more interesting because this is kind of an actual real world examples of some of the things that GDPR will affect. Ryder Cup we did last year, last September, Europe won, Leaving Blue. It was basically native apps, Android, iOS, for those who are visiting the course in Paris so that they could follow the players around the course, see where the bars are, see where the shops are on the actual course itself. To get the data into the apps, we used a CMS that was using Cumulus, which is a US data stored company that we work with very closely. Being US based, instantly, not red flag, but something to really consider with the GDPR. Even though we were hosting the files that were generated from the CMS in the Paris AWS region, the fact that the data was transferring between the US and Europe meant that we had to think about the data protection implications. Mailgun, it's my go-to email sending service because it's really simple to use. However, they were US based as well. So even though everything would be based in either Ireland, London data centers, as soon as we went out to send like a welcome email, for example, a password reset email, it was going via US servers. Fortunately, Mailgun realized that this would be incompatible probably with GDPR. So to remain compliant, they now have a EU-based service. It's these kind of little things that you normally wouldn't think about. This was essentially just a task on a story in Jira that said send some emails when we get new users. But you have to kind of step back, think about where the data's being sent from, how it's being used, and if they're compliant. And if they are we are good. Which then leads me to cloud. As Ian mentioned, we can basically list and store our data anywhere we want. Most of the big cloud providers have locations around the world. Europe is a good place to start because most of the projects team, especially the data, is going to be UK based anyway. Brexit is probably going to throw a spanner in the works. Well, it's throwing a spanner in the works. There's no problem about it. We just advise you store it in London, and we should be fine. We can go down the walls and not let anyone in. We'll be fine. And that basically finishes mine. Like I said, it wasn't a deep dive. Most of you will be doing this all the time. We're just going to formalise it a wee bit more. Any questions? See Ian. Cheers.
Or Nick. Okay guys, I'm not going to keep you much longer. So in terms of changes that we're trying to make in not just making Waracle more compliant, but as usual trying to make it a better place to work for permanent staff. You'll all have new contracts within the next few weeks. These are just contracts that reflect the working environment that we're in now that perhaps we weren't particularly good at reflecting before. So just a few minor changes. Come to me with any questions you have when you get your new contract out. Otherwise, just sign it, send it back to Claire. Poor Claire will have loads of work to do over the next few weeks, so be as nice to her as you possibly can. There's a few key updates to the handbook. A few of you guys have actually benefited from this already. Last year we introduced, but it hadn't actually been written into the handbook, paid paternity leave. Prior to that it was only a statutory. We've also introduced some paid maternity leave, extended sick pay. There's a few other bits and bobs that should be a benefit to you if you are a permanent member of staff. New HR system, you should have all received a form to fill in if you're a permanent member of staff, and in fact if you're a contractor you will have done as well. You will not be included on our permanent staff HR system though, please don't worry about that. It's just, it's a way for us to get more on top of the number of staff that we're dealing with now. And Claire, I think, has sort of sent them out to all staff, and yeah, we should have had most of them back. Yeah, well done, you've sent them back, very good. We rolled out a little bit of compliance training last year in Clydesdale Bank. We haven't done much with it since then. It was quite interesting to see who did it, who didn't do it. Dan and Sergey, you're my favourites. Love you guys, love you. Everyone will be exposed to compliance training once a year now. It doesn't matter who you are in the company, you're going to be exposed to it. It will be as short as I can possibly make it. It will be online, and it will be teeny tiny little courses, okay? I've even chopped what we gave to the Clydesdale Bank guys last year after getting a bit of feedback and how much time it took them, all right? I am here just to ask, always, okay? Please, I know I'm not as accessible as I used to be. That's just to do with the number of people I'm dealing with, and that my remit's got a lot bigger, but please, I'm on the end of Slack all the time, okay? In terms of contractors, same again, I've been looking closely at the contract with solicitor and trying to make sure that our direct contracts, not the guys who come through the agencies, obviously I don't have much influence over those, but if you're not through an agency and you've got a direct contract, I'm trying to make sure it's as IR35 compliant as it can possibly be. I want to make sure that you guys want to keep working with us. You could always become perms if you're interested. Not looking at anyone in particular, but you're more than welcome. Come and speak to me again. Again, there will be an online compliance training for you to complete. It's exactly the same stuff, and it's just because we need to make sure we're compliant, especially for people like Clydesdale Bank and Sainsbury's Bank particularly. These are the guys who ask us for this training actually within the contracts that we sign with them, okay? Again, I'm here, please ask, but there's actually a team now, it's not just me. So we've got Miranda in the room somewhere at the back, yay! We've got Natalie in the room, in the middle. Okay, great. We've got Claire and we've got Claudia. These girls are all brilliant. Please speak to them. If I'm not around, they're all perfectly capable of answering your queries.